Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name is Clinton Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 139 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. All right, now it's the end of the day instead of the beginning of the day. When you get old, you get tired. Now, I've done about a third. That's about 6 feet, about 2 feet. So that's about a third of the side. You can see down here where the line is. They got this all roughed down, and that's all within less than a quarter inch of being flat. Okay, so gauge your day. Get down here. Gauge your day when you're doing your work. Learn when you're getting tired to pay attention and not say, well, I just want to push through and force this last little bit and make it happen. Okay, that's when things go off the cliff. Okay, and you blow an edge, you lose the end of a nose, fingertips, whatever. You check a line in the drapery, and then you see a little puff. You cracked it. You checked it, you cracked it, it's done, it's junk. So learn to know when to say when. It's important working on this, and then again, I don't want to be a know-it-all and treat you like you don't know. But I say things and people go, "Wow, I never thought of that." Okay, so I'm telling you this because you may have never thought of it. It's really tempting on a big stone like this, or any upright stone, any vertical stone, to carve and to sort of lean on the stone. Okay, it's a really bad thing to do. You need to think, in terms of sports, you need to have your feet, you need to be where if somebody bumps into you or something falls over and hits you, because if you've got stuff on the shelf, it may fall over and hit you. If you've got something, a hose may hit you. You don't know. Somebody may come in the studio, when your back's turned and you don't see them, and they don't know how to address you. They don't know that they need to come over and get in your peripheral vision and kind of make some movement and get your attention. They may do something stupid and throw something at you, or just to freak you out, and you don't want to jump and break something. They may not understand that, but you do. Okay, so don't lean on the stone. And when you're working it, be careful about how you address it, because as I'm doing this 9-point work and I'm working, see if we can see this, I'm running my hand machine. The last thing I want to do is angle it this way to where I'm pushing towards that edge, because that edge will just go poof, and you'll have a really big problem. Now, this side is clearing off really well, because this is the rift. Okay, this is breaking really straight. Okay, which means I can come down here and go. I can leave a gap. Like I've done with other stuff, where we do a little bit, we skip over, and then we clear the material between them. I can skip down like here. I could cut a strip and have an opening, and I can push to it and open it up really fast. And I only have to break certain amounts of it at one time. I don't have to 9-point the entire surface. Some of it I can take a chisel and push it off carefully, because now I understand how this is breaking. It's not digging, it's breaking really straight, so I can be really careful. Flip side, that means that down here on the plinth, this little bit of overhang, it's going to be very susceptible to damage if we stress it the wrong way. So, but this is progressing along well. Like I said, it's late in the day. I'm getting tired, physically tired. I mean, I'm not a kid, and it's really weird to think that you do this for all these years, and now all of a sudden you're older than anybody that you ever cut with, and but you gotta acknowledge that, and you got to admit that, and you got to accept that, and you got to, run in such a way that you may win the prize. You got to slow down and say, you know what, if I want to do this and not screw up, I better learn to pay attention. So I think I'm going to go up and do some work on the videos and work in the office, and try to wrap this up for the day, because I'm getting physically tired. And I may do a little bit more just casual stuff, but I've been putting a lot of effort into this, and I need to know when to quit, when to say when, and you do too. You need to pay attention and learn, because if you don't, you will make mistakes. I guarantee you'll break stuff. All right, so see if she gets ugly overnight. We'll be back in the morning. I'll explain that later. Well, I'm back in the morning. Through the magic of video, it wasn't actually just overnight. It's a different morning. And during that in-between time, we've had the flu and gotten better. And all three of us, being my wife and my mother, and been doctors and medicine and all that stuff, and coughing our brains out. No fun, And but I'll touch on a couple of things. I mentioned about her getting ugly overnight, the stone getting ugly overnight. And that's a real common theme. I mentioned it, I think, before. But I mentioned it in a couple different ways. It's important to get away from the stone and do something else. You'll when we start doing her face or pretty stuff, the way she's cutting everything, especially when you're direct carving and you're flying and you're just blowing through work. You're just cutting and cutting and cutting. Got to get it done. Got to get it out. Hurry up, get it cut, get it out. And while you're learning, you'll put it together. You go home at night, man, she's beautiful. She looks so good. And then you come in the morning, and oh my God, she got run over by the ugly truck. Whatever, pickle-headed monkey, man, cockeyed, crooked, had a stroke, drunk, whatever. Face is wrecked. Hands are like baseball mitts. You thought they were beautiful, and they're like gargantuan. Or, the terrifying thing, you come in their little tiny midget hands, little itty bitty, half the size they're supposed to be, because you can't make them bigger. That's what I talk about with surrendered volume. And so taking a break and getting away from things so you can see them is really good. Now, I wouldn't recommend having the flu. That's really kind of taking it to extremes. But, had another stone to cut, paneled another stone, and came and went, nothing, we paneled stones, in other videos here. So I'm not going to stop and do more video of that. But this is, easy money work, it's when, you're able to just, strip a panel off and knock it back. In this panel, they'd blown that family dame like 1/2 inch deep. So there was, a lot of times you're just doing a name panel, not a family name panel. And the letters will be inch, inch and a half, and they'll be, they blow them about 1/4 inch deep typically to V-line them. And these were blown like 1/2 inch, 5/8. I think I had to go 5/8 on this panel to clean it up. And it was a lot. We're getting back to where we can get stone on a regular basis now. We don't have the delays that we had during the pandemic, where they were historic. I mean, we just couldn't get stone. This is the, 16 months to get the stone, almost a year and a half just to get the stone. Made a trip down to the quarry to line up stone for a big project we've got coming up. After this, we've got to have some stone that'll it's a shell rock job, and so I got to have stone with a certain grain orientation and certain structure and the way I want it laid out. And so I went down to walk through that with the quarryman, with the man that owns the quarry, that saws it up. They'll give me anything I want. So he knows exactly what I need. He says, oh yeah, I'll pull a stone, I'll get exactly what you want. And that's critical. You can't just take any piece of stone and do it. And that's one of the benefits of using dimension stone, of ordering real stone versus finding a big rock out in a field or a creek and just starting carving it. You know, people do that, and I get it. I mean, I understand, you know, there's a draw for that stuff, and there's a certain amount of, you know, romance involved with it, you know, because you're just working with what's there. But you got to understand there's probably a lot of inherent flaws in those stones that are, you know, basically exfoliated by, you know, geological activity, you know, and whether they're erratics left over from glaciers or whatever, and they probably got a lot of issues with it, and you're not going to necessarily know where the grain's going, you know, if you're working with a piece of granite. So that's something else. And in the meantime, you know, I want you to understand doing a business, okay, the business model, the reality of doing this work. We got another project that we had quote unquote sold to do a piece for a local historical monument, and you know, all agreed, going to pay for it, everything's covered, all that stuff, and the patron that had contacted me did some checking and thought it was, they were trying to gain an easement to actually own it, to protect the site, because there wasn't a clear line. They'd done a lot of research and it wasn't real clear on who owned it or who was upkeeping it. And they found out that it belonged to one, I don't want to get into names, one significant historical group, okay? And, but as they got talking, they didn't have the proper insurance and whatever to proceed with the project. This larger group that supposedly owned the project. So some research was done by the patron to find out that this group didn't own it. The national chapter owns it. The national chapter is not responding in any way, shape, or form. They're you know, you're calling a dead end. You call them up and they don't call, they don't respond in any way. And so the patron was calling me to say, you know, we still want to do this project, but we don't really know, you know, the status. And I said, well, you know, one of the things that I was trained during my training was that any project that involves any amount of committee or bureaucracy or anything like that, it's real easy for them to just turn into a train wreck, and they can take years and years and years and years of work. And if I had to guess what I would expect, and this is just my speculation, that's why I'm not putting any names out there, but as an individual patron spending private money, and this is the way the rules work, if you use private money for a project, typically you can do whatever you want with it, you know, and that's how they played the game on the Martin Luther King Memorial. Is they pretended to use federal money, but it was just a ghosting. They just wanted people to make the assumption that there were federal monies involved, to think that the government was doing all this chaos, when in reality they never claimed the actual money from the government. They just put it out there that it was available, and they never submitted paperwork. With this project, as an individual patron, the patron could write me a check and pay me, no problem. If you get into anything that involves the public or the public money, and that can go into public ownership of any of the resources that are allocated to it, they typically have to do a fair bid, open bid, fair bid process where anybody can bid it. And so if I had to guess anything, I would expect that this project will probably transition from being a privately hired project of me doing it just because they called me and I'm local and we have a good relationship and they said they want what I could do, to a national group saying, well, we're going to put this out for bid and see who comes back and who wins the bid. And in all reality, instead of me cutting the job by hand and polishing it by hand and doing a very authentic, reproduction of this 125-year-old missing piece. They'll probably order an imported piece that's cut by a machine and polished and done up and will cost a fraction of what it would cost to do it by hand. And it'll look very false. It'll look very, it'll look very profane on top of this old hand-cut piece. It won't look like it's still the hand-cut piece that's been cleaned up. And so, but you put it on the back burner, and that's why it's always good to have a lot of things potentially going on. We've got, you know, this project went to Elberton and looked at the other day, these stones, to line up stones, and we've got a small bas relief that's pending, and then another full round pointed shell rock kind of unique piece that's been in the wings for the last few years, and for a number of reasons. You run into projects that involve the passing of a young child or, you know, a baby, and you just have to give them space because it's a lot to deal with. And, you know, me going through any angst of when am I going to get to cut this stone, I didn't lose a child. Okay, so you gotta put it in perspective and you know, realize you just need to step back, and it'll work out the way it works out. That's just the way it'll go. So, but anyways, we'll get back on cutting this and just relax and cut some. I did put the tri-square on the stone to do some checking with my ruler, and my dimensions of how high I am here versus this edge are really good. They're right on the money. They're the same thing, so I'm very straight across here. I'll work this down and rough this off, and as I get into being warmed up, I'll go back to working this down more and doing more accurate work, and I'll work up to my edge when I'm feeling the best, and then we'll take the crown down and hopefully can get this wrapped up fairly soon. And then we'll put a couple of cuts down on here and tip this edge so that we can tip this line and have this straight edge here to work with as a reference, because the pencil line simply is too soft, it'll just disappear. But anyways, back to work. As I work in this, see if I can show you. This ripper, okay, 3 blades, square cross section, is made with one piece of carbide. And the way they set it up, they had these teeth spread way out to the edges. I don't know if you can read that well, maybe against my shirt. Can you see how these shoulders, they're not as deep as the valleys? That's because these teeth are spread too far apart, the cutting blades. And the only way to address that without just throwing the tool away or wasting a lot of it is you have to sharpen it and continue to sink these two valleys here, and try to move these two outer blades towards the center, because once they get spread apart about so far, they act as 3 individual tools, and they each take a single bite. And the bite is so deep that they don't transfer back and forth easily. They sink instead of taking a little bite because they're supported. And you'll find that with any tool like this bush chisel, this 3-blade, compared to this 5-blade. This tool will go a lot slower because it will tend to grab and sink more, and it won't move across the surface as smoothly because it's not supported as well. We want to do the same thing with our rippers. Sometimes you'll have a ripper with 4 teeth. 3 teeth is pretty common, but they need to be pretty close, because if they're spread out like this, they work, but they don't really work. So I'm trying to rough this in and wear this down to use some of this carbide instead of just sharpening it off, because otherwise you just have to run these 2 edges in a lot. And I don't know what the ideal gap is, but they need to be closer than this, because this still cuts really slow. All right, so I haven't covered that thoroughly before. There it is. Get your rippers sharpened to where they're, set them up. Usually you'll have like 3 or 4 pieces of carbide that are just set right side by side, and they're very narrow, and this valley coincides with the brazed joint between them. But because this was a wide tool that I got in a pile of other tools, it's just the way it is, and I haven't made up any new rippers yet, so I've got to. All right, back to work. All right, let's take a look at this. Okay, this whole side is roughed off all the way down. And there's still just a little bit here at the bottom to finish up, but I'll finish up when I do the plinth. And because we still got to do the top of the plinth underneath here. I'll get that all sorted out and make sure all that marries up really good instead of doing it perfect right now. During this type of work, this has been rough out work. Using tools with short carbide. See how short that carbide is right there? There's not a whole lot left. So if one of these corners pops off when I'm over here 9-pointing and I'm still up, 3/16 of an inch or whatever, it's no big deal. The same thing if I'm using a chisel. Like this chisel's not particularly short, but you can save your short chisels, the ones that are worn out and they've only got just a little bit on there, for doing this type of rough out work where you're pretty secure and you're not likely to break something if the tool collapses, because the tool will collapse and it'll give you a little bit of a shove. Let me hang the camera back up, see if I can get it in position. There's a couple of things I want to point out. And I think this will show better. Turn the light off. Okay. Whenever you're doing, rough out work, and you're really pushing and you're really leaning, you got to be really careful. Like I said, you got to keep your balance, okay? You don't lean on the stone. You don't want something to all of a sudden fall off a shelf because, a cat runs by or somebody bugs you or whatever, and you get hit and you lose your balance. You also don't want to be pushing and lose your balance, have the tool fly. Because if you're pushing on a piece and pushing on a piece, and it pops off, and you have a chunk that pops off, and you allow follow through with your tool to carry through, you can very easily grab, and if this edge was already cut, pop that edge right out. Same thing, that's why I don't direct energy over here at this edge. I don't want it to dig and all of a sudden pop a side out, because it will do that. And the same thing happens when you're especially with a 9-point, because a 9-point you don't really hold it like you hold a chisel. Chisels, you always have a grip on the chisel so that you're protecting it, you're guiding it, you're doing whatever. You don't just have it out here and you're letting it go. The whole purpose of a 9-point is that it bounces around a lot and it pulverizes tools, pulverizes the stone as it's flying around. If you're on a hump of stone and that hump of stone lets go and you're pushing, this tool can fly out. That's why we've got the surround on there. It can also hit other aspects of your stone and other elements and damage it. So you got to keep control. It's supposed to be kept in square contact with your stone, but if you're pushing something off, you may be in square contact, but still be at an angle to the major mass of stone. So now I got to work on dressing this off and squaring this all up. Like I said, the first thing I want to do is I want to put this edge together. I want to tip this line so I've got a definite line here instead of just a red pencil mark. And probably what I'll do is I'll saw in just a little bit above it, and so I can tip to it. I'll saw in and then I'll cut it with a chisel just to bulk off the bulk of it, and probably cut off enough lines here to where I can put a 2-blade or even a bush chisel and lower it so it goes right to that edge. And then we can start balancing this out. Now, use your judgment, okay? If we happen to be, okay, let's just say the pencil line's 1/8 of an inch, all right? This pencil line is on a different face than this pencil line, okay? They're 90 degrees, you know, to each other. And so, that can have an impact. I didn't go past this pencil line yet, I'm just up to it. But we cut based upon a pencil line on this face, and if we happen to be over the width of the line, we could easily be off about 1/8 of an inch. Now, there's a couple ways to solve that when we start pushing this panel together. I can measure this. From what I can tell, I'm within a 1/16 of an inch from the edge of this red line, this bevel back here, to where this is, and that's using my tri-square and my old hammered beat up ruler. Okay, going like this, letting it bounce there, this depth versus this depth. And this is cut by hand, and this has been pounded on and used, so it's consistent. That's the only thing I can say. It may not be perfectly accurate, but it's consistent. I always cut these 12 inches long. I've got some that are, 18 inches long, 1.5 feet, 1/6, and I don't really use them that much. The 1-foot ones I use a lot, and you'll get the ones that are marked really easy to read, and you'll use them all up, you won't be able to read them, so you got to use these ones that are all buggered. But when you get a junk tape measure, cut it up. When a tape measure blows up or dies or won't spring anymore, don't throw it away, save it, cut it up. You'll have a pile of rulers. And when you don't like them or you want to throw them out or whatever, you just get another one. But back to this. I put this on, let's just say, for instance, this line here is at, this edge is at 1/4 inch deep, okay, here at the back. And up here at this edge, that line is exactly 3/16 of an inch. And this is flush with that 3/16 of an inch. How do you solve it? There's 2 ways to solve it. You gotta take this down anyways, okay? So this has to be flattened up, screwed up, where it's all 9-pointed, there's no prep. We can go down to just this level, get that straight. That's gonna leave us a little bit of a gap over here to that line. A beveled gap, a beveled edge, okay? So the easy thing to do on the front would be to just do a bevel that matches it. And take this down on the inside of this edge, like analogous to over here, we'll tip this and take this down to that 1/16, put a, 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch wide bevel on this front face. It'll match the back face and we'll be done. Or we have to cut the whole thing down a full 1/4 inch in order to resolve that. Then we have to make sure that this line is true and we have to rework this line. So your job may be in spec just fine by putting the bevel on this edge that's a little bit wider, or tipping this edge, put a bevel on it so it matches this bevel, and you're done, okay? That's one of the reasons you bevel to an edge and you don't cut it. You don't cut a square edge, you sneak up on it and leave it, because you may need to leave a little bit of bevel in order to expedite the whole job. It's more important that this whole face is pretty flat, pretty plumb when we stand the die up like it is now. We're going to put this light and have it rake right down here, because I guarantee there's going to be some lines across it, because I can feel a couple of them. Like it's a little low right there, it's a little high right there. We've got to axe all that off. That's more important than making sure that this is all within a 1/16 of an inch up or down. Nobody's going to notice, and it's not going to hurt this job. It may have jobs when it does matter, but on this job it doesn't. And so we want this face to be great, get it really flat, and then we'll make sure if we have to tweak these edges with a little bit of a bevel, then we're golden. And if they come out perfect, we're going to bevel them anyways, because if you don't bevel them, they'll pop when you put the straps around to pick it up. All right? So, on to the next lesson. All right, the next lesson is going to have to come on the next video. We're running enough time on this one. I'll patient enough to listen to me run my mouth for 30 minutes. You don't need to listen to me talk for 45 or an hour on the same video. But I really appreciate it. We'll bring up something that's been on my mind and related to, earlier I said we've just been through the flu. So I've been to the doctors lately. And I could have been to the doctors more over the years. I know I've got some dust issues, I'm sure, because you can't do this and not have dust to a certain extent, because it just permeates your entire life. But if you look back on the last several videos, I've been coughing for quite a while. My wife says I've been coughing for 2 or 3 months. And I know it's been bothering me, and I didn't really, what are you going to do? You got dust. If you end up with silicosis, you're not going to get rid of it. You just got to learn to live with it. You got to deal with it, and try to make the best of it. And we did some checking while we were there about the flu and stuff. My wife was talking about it, and we, came to the understanding that it may just be as simple as have some allergies. I grew up when you had hay fever or whatever, and I didn't really have hay fever, but apparently I've got some allergies that we've not really dealt with, or you just tough your way through it, because that's the way we grew up. You just deal with it. If you don't fall apart when the pollen's out there, you're really not that bad. Well, so we tried some allergy meds. It's cut down on my coughing tremendously, which was a big weight off my shoulders, because I really didn't want to find out that I was really screwed with dust. Yeah, I'd like to be able to do this for a while longer. And my grandfather lived to be almost 80. He died just a few weeks short of his 80th birthday, with 10% of one lung. He smoked, but he had dust really, really bad. And his father, my great grandfather, his brother, they had the little farm right next to our farm there in Vermont. They all died of dust. They were dead by the time they were 40. So it's very real. They didn't live to be old men. I think my great grandfather was a little bit older, but I know a friend who died young. So, but anyways, we'll wrap this video up and start on those lessons on the next video. So my name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.